Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to a special online event today called Discover the Sacred Encounters in Your Dreams, Natural Dream Work to Truly Feel Your Dreams and Bring Them to Life. My name is Stephen Dinan. I'm the founder, president, and CEO of the Shift Network, and I'm really delighted to be with you here, learning from somebody who's not somebody I have met before today, but who has had a really powerful influence on the whole transformational field with books like The Jew and the Lotus. He's had 16 books. He's appeared on Oprah. He's really been at the forefront of the work of awakening and transformation in our culture. His name is Rodger Kamenetz, and he is he's devoted the last 15 or 16 years of his life to really working with dreams in a new way. Led to a book called The History of Last Night's Dream, which Oprah Winfrey raved about, actually brought him on her program. And it really is a lot about uncovering the deeper soul messages and soul work within a kind of a natural approach to dreaming rather than an interpretive approach to dreaming. So with that said, really delighted to have you here, Rodger. Thanks so much for joining us on the Shift Network.
Thanks, Stephen. What a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, I know we're going to have this hour with you, and we're having a chance to go much deeper with an upcoming program we'll share some about. But let's start with a bit of your personal backstory. So what is it that really convinced you to devote the last 16 years of your life to really seeing dreams as a portal to our transformation, to a portal to our soul and our deeper awakening and service? Like, why have you focused so heavily in this area?
No, they focused me. I think they came. I've always been fascinated by dreams, and I would say that dreams were certainly behind my first book of poetry. I fell in love with poetry when I was 15. My first book came after my grandfather died and appeared in a dream and spoke to me, and those words were so powerful. Later, I wrote a book called Terra Infirma, based on a dream. The whole book is based around a single dream where my mother came to me after she died and spoke this really profound wisdom to me. So this really gave me this core sense already that in a dream we can have a sacred encounter in the specific sense that the dead can come alive to us in our dreams. And I think so many people have had this experience. And it's also core to the idea that in dreams, we bring the dream to life. We don't interpret. When you meet your dear one in a dream, you don't interpret the dream. You feel it. You feel it deeply. So I always had this curiosity about dreams, and I felt that it had a secret relationship to this ongoing voice of poetry operating in me and coming out. Later, when I was involved with meeting the Tibetans in Dharamsala, in the book you mentioned, The Jew and the Lotus, I realized, wow, the Tibetans are like the world champions of visualization. They have these really elaborate meditative techniques to visualize. And I wondered, well, was there anything in my birth tradition like that? So I found a teacher in Jerusalem named Colette Abulker Muscat, who taught me this Kabbalistic approach to meditating, contemplating images. She told me that images are sovereign life. They are a life in us. When I wanted to study dreams a few years later, I met Mark Bregman in Vermont, an intuitive teacher. And for the past 19 years since studying with him, I've been developing my own sense of dreams. I'm fascinated by the fact of the dream. Not to the interpretation, but the very fact that we are dreaming humans. What an amazing, if we were going to design human beings, would we necessarily have them dream? And the way that feelings in dreams are held by images. So through this encounter with images, we can seek the sacred encounter in our dreams.
So it's interesting as you're speaking about dreams, it seems like it's really important for you and your orientation to take them more literally rather than metaphorically, that we're taking it as a real aspect of life that we're living, not just a symbol for something else. I'd love for you to share a little bit why that pivot is important for folks.
Sure. So it's important because we miss what the dreams are trying to bring when we leave the field of the dream, the actual experience of the dream, and start looking up in a book or asking someone else, what did it mean? Which is the whole interpretive tradition, which of course is an old tradition in many ways. You might say if you consider, for instance, the book of Genesis as a primary book about dreaming, because we have the dream of Jacob and the ladder, and we have the dream of Joseph, the dreams of Joseph, but also Joseph who interprets dreams for Pharaoh. We kind of got off into the interpretative pathway. But really, we forget that you can have a dream, wake up, and your world's transformed, which is really what happens with Jacob's dream of the ladder. He wakes and says, wow, literally he says, this place was awesome and I didn't know it. And so a dream can revive your sense of the awesome, of the beautiful, of the deep and the richly felt. And that is a much more important aspect of dreaming for me than interpreting dreams and looking up symbols in books and so forth.
And so a lot of the lineages we have from Western psychology have been more interpretive, right? So it's the symbolic, this is like really about your id or your superego, or this is your primal impulses. And so that what you're saying is that actually diminishes the transformational value sometimes in what's occurring, because we're pulling ourselves back from it.
Right. The transformational value comes from being in your dream, being in what I would call the field of space-time feeling. And I use it that way because they're all interacting. If you see something wondrous or terrible, if you move closer to it in space, you feel it more deeply. If you spend more time with it, you feel it more deeply. So by really coming down to the fundamentals of, well, where were you standing? How far away were you from this man with the gun, or this lion, or this beautiful angelic person? Can you come a little closer? Can you spend a little more time? So by rooting ourselves in the facts of the dream, what actually happened, we can begin to identify those events in the dream that eventually lead to the sense of a sacred encounter. In other words, if you see a dream as, well, let me give an example. If you're walking in the redwood forest, I know you're out in California, and you see a beautiful redwood tree, and you stand before it and you feel it, and someone comes up to you and says, "How did you interpret that tree?" or "What does the tree symbolize?" It would seem very strange. And I'm suggesting that we take the same approach with our dreams. Let's just encounter the images and feel them more deeply.
That's really interesting. So it's sort of like you heighten the transformational experience when you bring more vivid details into it. It's like when a good storyteller tells the story, they're telling how they caught their breath and then the hair stood up on end. It's like they bring the more sensory details into it, and that actually brings us further in. And so you're saying that if we do that same process, inquire into what are some of the other aspects of the experience in the dream, that it's going to become more vivid and alive and therefore have more value to us.
Well, the dreams take us on a course, and we're going to be following this course. They introduce you to images that are astonishing, scary, tender, and by engaging these images, it begins to affect us, and we can open our hearts to them and encounter them more deeply. And this prepares us for the biggest fact of the dream, that in our dreams we encounter presences. They could be animal, but primarily human in form, teachers, friends, mentors, lovers, mothers, fathers, who can heal us, help to heal us through our relationship with them. And this begins by encountering them in the first place, by treating them as the facts in the dream, instead of going off to interpret what did it mean. You know what it meant when you see it.
So to circle back to, you gave the example of both your mother and your father coming to you in a dream. Like maybe you could share narrate that a little bit for us, and how your engagement resulted in a real profound shift in your life.
So let me explain how I got it wrong, Stephen, because I think it's probably helpful too. I had one dream. My mother died very young, in her 50s, and I had a dream where she appeared as I knew her as a child. She was very beautiful, and I walked up to her and I said, "Mother, what are you doing here? You're dead." So my response to her was, in a way, to bring in an outsider waking life perspective into that moment. So instead of having an encounter with her, she turned away. So I had to learn how to be with her in the dream. And this learning involves becoming more aware of our feelings. And this is a big piece of what we're going to talk about, I think, to distinguish between the feelings in our dreams and the reactions that we have. That was a reaction. So later, in another dream, she came. It was a very beautiful dream. And we were in a garden, and I heard her say, I saw an oriole fly off of a fountain. I saw a golden coin drop, and I saw a leaf fall from a tree, one image after the other. And then a voice that came through her said, all these separate things that you think are unrelated are like the motion of a single wave through water. So it was such a profound statement to me that the scattered incidents and facts of our lives might be unified if we learn how to see our lives with greater imagination. Because I think imagination is what unifies our experience.
Fascinating. So, for those of us who are not, I'm not as conscious of my dreaming. So, how do you go about if you have just like a fragmentary connection with something that happened in a dream, like more of a vague sense? How do you then work with that in a way that elicits more of the feeling and the sensate qualities so that it comes alive more?
Yeah, I think that to some extent we can practice first with the dream images that do come. So let me address that for a moment. That yes, so many people can't remember their dreams very well, but partly because maybe we're not using them or making use of them or valuing the images that come to us at night. So just to begin a practice, we're going to talk about how to record your dreams in the class and what to look for, and then how to dwell on whatever images come. Gosh, I remember when I first started working with one of my teachers, I just saw a cricket. That was the dream. I wrote the word cricket down. That's pretty fragmentary. And yet I could get so much from just feeling that image, especially with the guidance of a good teacher. So begin small with whatever comes, whatever words or images come, and then believe me, if you start paying attention, more of them will come to you. The dreams will get more whole. There's more to say, but let me just stop with that and see if you have a question or want to follow through on that.
So you said that the cricket, as an example, like opened up into whole other things. So what is the process where you take the category? So our mind is used to creating a category. Okay, that was cricket, and so now you're relating to an abstraction from the experience versus the full felt experience. You get back into a dream state that's already passed and have that full feeling re-enter, reanimate you.
Right. So we reanimate the dream in the session, and we feel the image. The Japanese haiku master Basho, in giving advice to poets, said, if you want to write about the bamboo, you have to become the bamboo. And it's like you have to sit in front of the bamboo and feel it until the ego kind of dissolves, the sense of separateness, and you begin to feel, oh, this is what it's like to be a bamboo, or this is what it's like to be a camellia, right? Or an orange tree. So it becomes embodied and deeply felt. So the image is not a thing out there separate from me. Many times, not always, but many times, the most striking images in our dreams are more like mirrors. So maybe seeing this cricket, which is kind of fragile and a little bit, oh, small. If it's a mirror, if it's an image of me in a certain way, then I have a way of entering into it. If I make it an interpretation, what do crickets symbolize? You see, I'm losing the possibility of identification with it. I could go on, but I don't want to maybe
You're
keep it short.
You're expanding your sense of identity. You're sort of seeing that image, and then you're entering it as a facet of you, if you will, sort of the sense of communion with that image. And perhaps do you enter it, like make it almost like a meditative practice as well, that you just spend time unfolding that connection and that sense of feelings and senses?
Yes, meditation's a good word. What we're going to focus on, though, is a particular practice of contemplation. The reason I use that word is it has the word temple and template in it. Originally, contemplation referred to, you would sort of mark off a field, a space that was called a templum, and you'd look and see which corner the eagle flew from or where the sparrows flew from. We're going back to ancient Rome. But when we contemplate an image, we bring it into ourselves and we feel it more deeply. So could I give an example? I have a client, and she dreamed of a hen came under her chair and laid a beautiful blue egg. And at first she was so taken with the egg, and it was so beautiful and wonderful to her. It was almost a childlike feeling in the dream. And then the mind came in and said, I wonder if I could get this egg across the border. How could I smuggle it? Maybe I should cook with it. See, the ego, as opposed to the soul, the ego wants to make use of things. It wants to possess them for its own use and its own preservation. So in the way that we learn to relate to images by contemplating them, we soften the ego function and we increase the soul function. Another way of saying it, I like to say, because I'm a poet, that a dream is a poem disguised as a story. We keep trying to make a story out of our dreams, and then we complain that our dreams have bizarre stories. Well, maybe a dream isn't really a story. Maybe a dream is the opportunity to go into a single deep moment of engagement, encounter, or contemplation, and experience time in a different way, as a depth rather than as a horizontal ongoing.
That's a really beautiful framing and illuminating understanding. So, and let's connect this back to what you were saying about the sacred encounter, which really seems very central for your work. It's that relating to something not just mechanistically as like, oh, a means to an end. How can this get me somewhere? But really, just in its intrinsic value. That's where the sacred encounter emerges. So the emerges more out of poetry than story, it sounds like.
Yeah, I don't want to scare people with the word poetry, although I am a poet, so I'm not scared personally. But all of us have at night an experience of what the poet, the great romantic poet Coleridge, who wrote Kubla Khan and The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, what he called primary imagination. So all of us have this ongoing image making function, casting up images constantly within us, and we become aware of them at night because the waking eye is closed. So we see these in the inner eye, in the imagination. This is an extraordinary thing in itself, Stephen, that as human beings, we engage with this ever ongoing activity of producing new images from within us. And they aren't imitations of waking life experience. They have their own autonomy, their own reality. And by engaging with them, we become more aware, each of us, of our inherent creativity. So that's another piece of what we want to talk about, that it's not that every human being is an artist, because there are other things you have to learn how to do to make a poem or a story or a photograph or a movie and so forth. But what is true is that every human in dreaming is engaging with what artists also engage with, which is primary imagination. And I think that's salutary in itself, to realize that, I may be depressed, I may be anxious, things may not be going well in my relationships, but I go to sleep and I'm Beethoven, I'm Picasso, I'm Virginia Woolf, I'm Emily Dickinson, I'm creating. There's this incredible, marvelous productivity of imagery in me. And so what we're trying to do is slow down so we can appreciate this wonderful ongoing process of primary imagination.
That's really beautifully shared. Well, I know we said that you would guide us on an experiential practice or journey here to help recognize our sacred dream encounters. So why don't we take a little time and have you directly guide everyone in a practice?
I'll do my best. I want to ask you, first of all, to just relax. If you can get into a comfortable position, and most of you probably have ways of doing that, and I want you to close your eyes, please. And I want you to breathe out 3 times. Now, I want you to try to bring to mind the face of, could be a child that you care about. It could be a baby even. This is in honor of Stephen. It could be an old person, someone that you really care about, who has cared about you. See if you can visualize this face. Don't be concerned if it's not stable. Just, if you think you see it, you see it. Just try to see this face. And notice how far you are. And if you're a bit far away, just take a step closer. And notice what's happening in your body, in your heart. Come take another step closer so you can almost touch this person and look right into her eyes or his eyes and smile. Feel the feeling of really connecting, of loving and being loved. Just hold on to that for a moment. Okay, now open your eyes and look around you and see if the world's slightly more awesome.
Beautiful. That's a simple practice, but really profound as well, to really just get fully connected to that deeper relationship that makes it sacred.
Right. So we use the word sacred in part because at the deepest level, all of our feelings are connected. And so we have different feeling words that we use somewhat loosely in waking life. But what dreams do is they give us images that make those words come alive for us. So in terms of sacred encounter, what comes out of it is a feeling of awe. It could be also terror. It could be fear. It could be wonder, right? And we also see how people in waking life and in dreams will kind of miss these feelings that come from such an encounter. I'll give you an example. I had a client, she was driving down a street here in New Orleans, a beautiful street, St. Charles Avenue, and she saw a 9-foot-tall giant lying in the curb, stretched out, just relaxed. He was fine. And she was fascinated. She slowed down and she began to feel something, a kind of wonder. And then she hit the gas and kept driving. So I said, why did you not stop and check this out? And she said, well, I had to get to work. So the waking life conditioning about work and being driven and driving causes you to miss the moments of wonder that the dream offers. And I think we can say that by connecting with these kinds of encounters in our dreams, we also learn how to connect with them in waking life. So going back to one of your questions, Stephen, the notion, I mean, one reason we don't pay attention to the images in our dreams is maybe we're not paying as much attention to the sensuality and the feelings in our waking life. We're not in the habit. We're too busy going to work. So dreams can kind of help us out of that.
It's like each is like its own little contemplative retreat. It's where we have the opportunity to just be fully present to all the sensate experience and the feelings, rather than kind of rushing on to the next thing. It's a great story.
That's right.
With the driving past the giant.
Right.
And even
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting. I just noticed for myself is that like I have a kind of a naturally interpretive way of seeing things. I see patterns and connections between things, and I think you're making me aware of how that can also be a barrier to the vivid, lived, meaningful experience of something as well. And so, in a way, it's like applying that deeper meditative practice into your dream, into the dreamscape.
Yes, we apply the meditation or the contemplation of images from waking life, taking in the beauty. When I wake up in the morning, I hear a bird singing. I just want to spend some time taking that in, feeling it. I would also say that I would like to suggest a way in which, instead of seeing our dreams from the utility point of view, from the point of view of waking life and what it can do for us, also, what about seeing waking life from the point of view of the dream, beginning to see and feel the world with greater imagination, which dreams expose us to?
One of the things that we wrote on the page describing today is that it's really important, the importance of distinguishing between facts and fantasies in dreams. I'd love for you to build on that and share a little bit more about, it's like there's this whole naturalistic approach, getting really real with what is, not our interpretive or going off in some other direction with it, feels very central. So how do we notice what's the difference between facts and fantasies?
So I gave one example, actually, that when she was driving, the fact of the dream was the giant, actually, right? Because it was there. She was seeing it. By fact, I mean what is taken in by the dream senses. The fantasy was actually, I have to go to work. Well, in waking life you do, but in the dream you didn't. You had a choice. You see what I'm saying? So fantasy is wrapped up with the ego making up stories about where we have to get to and what we have to do and who we have to be. And so dreams, images in dreams disrupt that narrative, mechanical narrative mechanism. I got to get to work. I got to get shopping, which actually pretends to have a great reality, but is actually a kind of fantasy. But let me give a second example. There was a dream in which someone says, I murdered somebody and the body is in the trunk, and now I'm driving the car and I see a blue light in the back, and the policeman comes out and he stops me, and I'm really scared. I'm going to get caught. And he asked me to get out of the car and open the trunk. So if you take as fact that the person murdered somebody and stuffed that person in the trunk, you miss the encounter in the dream, which is really with the policeman. In fact, there's no evidence. If I ask the person, well, who did you murder? Do you know? No. Do you remember lifting the body into the trunk? It'd be quite difficult. No. Do you even know anything about this person you think you murdered? No. So actually, you didn't murder anybody in this dream. It's not a fact of the dream. So what is the fact? The blue light, the anxiety when the policeman approaches, and then this incredible moment when you're going to have to open the trunk. And we understand the dream in a very different way if we separate the story making or the fantasy from the actual facts in the dream. Then we understand maybe the policeman wants you to see there's nothing in the trunk.
So actually the policeman is helping to dispel the fantasy rather than bust them. That's really fascinating, and I think it's interesting going back to the giant. It's that this a rewiring that if you could have a 12-headed unicorn show up in your dream, that actually is the fact, and then the fantasy is the interpretation that that's not real, because
Right.
it's simply so it's a little bit of a figure ground reversal to how we normally think about fact and fantasy.
Well, normal is an interesting word, isn't it? Because normal is not an existent out in the world. It is itself a narrative. It's a way of telling a story about the world, which says what's normal and what isn't. And the dream doesn't work that way. It presents events and encounters, and they are the reality of the dream. And I contend that they have their own reality. They have a reality just as our encounters in waking life have a reality. But in both cases, also, a lot of what's going on in my head and the ongoing story of Rodger gets in the way of encounters.
And so this connects in with why you call it natural dream work. So natural dream work is sticking closer to the facts and to what's naturally true, rather than the overlays that our mind tends to create to make meaning of things or story it so it's utilitarian and it's taking us somewhere that we want to go.
Thank you for listening so well. That's totally correct. And so by becoming aware of the story-making mechanism and the interpretive mechanism, which are closely allied, we begin to separate from it a bit. And this is where I refer to this process of dream ego being transformed, or I would say dissolved a bit, and becoming more dream soul, more receptive. You know, the poet Arthur Rimbaud, and he said this when he was 15, which is kind of amazing. He was writing to his teacher, and he said, you know, it's like there's wood that suddenly discovers, oh, I'm a violin. In other words, the ego is a very narrow aperture for what we truly are. Oh, I'm just wood. But to discover that you're a musical instrument is a great expansion of feeling and of imagination.
So the parallel with the dreamscape would be that it's too often it's like the interpretation is like locking us into seeing ourselves as wood rather than opening us to the possibility of being a violin.
Right, and dreams teach us what I call the harmonics of feeling. So I use a musical analogy instead of saying a spectrum. I say a harmonic, because a feeling is like like when you have a feeling of terror, there's going to be an overtone of awe in that terror. And there might be an undertone of simple fear. And there might even be a little of an overtone of wonder. So all those are vibrating at once in a feeling. Feelings are really rich notes. And dreams teach us that quality of feeling, so that musical quality, you might say. Whereas, so if we resist feeling, we override feeling because we're scared, then we get in the habit of control or of worry and anxiety, which in my vocabulary aren't really feelings, they're really reactions. So feelings are in the present, like a single note on the piano and as it reverberates. Whereas anxiety, for instance, as opposed to fear, is a reaction. If could give an example, if someone has a dream and they say to me, I was sitting at the bus stop and I was afraid I would miss the bus and then I would miss the test. Never mind what test. Right? There's no test. But a second dream would be I was standing in a room and a lion walked into the door and I was afraid. So both dreamers use the word afraid of missing the bus, afraid of the lion. But what a different experience. The first experience the dream is showing is not really fear in an immediate sense when you're worried about the future, right? The second is immediate, existential, an encounter, the lion and you. And the terror, the fear, the awe, all the feelings that might come up in that encounter are so important. They're healing.
That's interesting. So fear itself is not to be feared, but it's another feeling to be explored as long as it's really truly fear related to the natural, factual experience of the moment rather than interpretive story of what might happen down the road.
Right. So like if I had a dream once, you'll learn about me, but sorry, but the mailman came into the house with a homeless man, and I was kind of nervous about this homeless guy. I didn't know him. And he started moving around, and that made me even more worried. And so I finally blew my top. I said, "Get out." And he came right up to me and he put a pistol to my throat. And then I felt terror. Now, if you interpret this dream from the waking life point of view, it's a banal story about, don't let strangers into your house or some nonsense like that. But if you understand the dream is giving me the gift of a deep feeling, a feeling, of course, I'm doing all I can to avoid, feeling of absolute terror, then I see the dream is giving me the opportunity to practice feeling terror. And the homeless man is actually what I would consider an archetypal figure who is helping me. He's really, in a way, acting as a teacher of feeling.
That's interesting. So in a way, as you relate to each person, thing in the dream as it is, they become more of a teacher to you because they have more of their full embodied reality. Is that sort of what you're getting at?
Well, this is I don't want to make it too simplistic because that's true, but they're also imagos of conditioning that we're going to talk about. So by which I mean that maybe our worry or anxiety or even our stinginess or cruelty, our violence even, might end up after a while, after you've been immersed in in our dreams for a while, might sort of split off from you and you get to see it. You get to see your pride, or you get to see the guy in my dream who said, "Get out," right? You get to see that guy, this impatient guy. And by him or her splitting off and you get to see it, then you get to disidentify with that. You don't have to be that anymore. So your reactivity also gets personified in dreams. And that's also extremely valuable. So it's not only the positive teachers and images of soul that we might encounter, but they're also images of our conditioning. Better
So
teaching.
I'm not sure I fully understood that. I'd love to understand. So our reactivity is also, how does our reactivity in the dream become because of a teacher, as you're saying there?
Well, if we want to live a life of feeling, we have to learn about our reactivity and how it keeps us from feeling. To use the example of the woman driving by the giant, this driven quality of I have to get to work is a conditioned response that really comes from a reactivity. It's a worry or anxiety about what will happen if I'm late for work or something like that, which a lot of us get driven by, or what will happen if I screw up at work, or there's so many variations of this, aren't there? If we're in reaction all the time, if we're living a life of reactivity, we go from guilt to shame to anger to anxiety. If we're bouncing along all the time in waking life with these reactions, we can't really engage with others in a deeper way. We can't engage with our experience of the natural world in a deeper way. We're constantly reacting. We can't be present.
You're particularly skilled at just these nuanced differentiators between things. It sort of, I think, perhaps comes from your poetic training and background. It's like you're seeing how to tease apart things that we have often just kind of lumped together in a big mushy mass. So I really appreciate that about the way you look at things, Rodger.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is a great opportunity now to shift gears and talk a bit more about your upcoming program. It's really clear from this hour together that natural dream work is it's a very different approach to the dream landscape. And given that we spend many hours every day in the dream landscape, how powerful it can be to open up a whole new world for experience and deepening and awakening and becoming a more fully embodied and fully feeling human by relating to our dreams in a new way. So we're very excited that Rodger has agreed to partner with us on producing or on teaching a whole program for you all about natural dream work. So it's called Natural Dream Work and the Sacred Encounter, Dissolving Ego, Embodying Deeper Feeling, and Receiving Your Soul's Wisdom. You can see it laid out in detail at naturaldreamworkcourse.com, naturaldreamworkcourse.com. And it really is about a transformational journey in your relationship with dreams, not to become a better at seeing encyclopedic knowledge of all the interpretive meaning of different symbols in your dreams, but really to use dreams as an arena to practice becoming more fully you and to inhabit more of yourself, to connect with these other sides, to have real relationships with beings sometimes who have departed, with other entities that might have something to share with you, a reflection or mirror on your deeper self. So it's really a profound approach to bringing alive the landscape of your dreams and making it more meaningful, vivid, and transformational. So, Rodger, I'd love for you to share in your own words what people will get by taking this 7-week journey with you, and then you can go into a little bit of highlights from the modules.
Okay, so overall, we're going to, as Stephen said, we're going to be introducing this natural dream work approach, which is different from many interpretive approaches. Not that they're bad, but it's just different. And we're really learning how to trust our own senses and our own feelings in our dreams as the kind of way to engage the dream. And the beginning of the course will have a kind of an overview in the first module. We'll give examples of really powerful dreams where there are sacred encounters, kind of aspirational, kind of a big up on the mountain look at the whole landscape that we're going to travel together. And I think I think you'll also hear dreams that will remind you perhaps of dreams that you've had that are important to you. Then we get back down to, in the second module, to the core thing, which is understanding the difference between a feeling and a reaction, which we've touched on a bit in this hour. It's really important to feel and know the distinction And when we think about it, we can get lost, but when we feel it, we know it. And there really are different ways in which a feeling arises and is in the whole body versus the way a reaction is often a partial mobilization of the body. So, and somewhat mechanical and somewhat, actually, unfortunately, somewhat familiar. The person who can't drive without having to, scream at people, or our old reactive bugaboos, and we all have them. So we're going to learn the difference between a feeling and a reaction by looking at dreams that show us that. In the third module, we're going to really start to focus on the dream ego, which is a representation of the waking life ego, but which is also different. The dream ego is the point of view in the dream, and then everything else in the dream surround is encountering that dream ego. So we're going to talk about this basic phenomenon in which the dream takes place in the primary imagination and gives us experiences of encounter between a point of view, the dream ego, and everything else in the dream. And during the DreamWorks Summit, one of the teachers, Patricia Berry, mentioned this idea that, we trust everything in the dream, but we trust the dream ego just a little less. So we're going to talk about that. In the fourth module, we're going to talk about specifically encounters with things, with images. In other words, in the dream, they're things. In waking life, we call them images, but in the dream, it's a thing. So, for instance, we're going to talk about, we mentioned earlier, the dream of the blue egg and what the feelings were in the initial encounter of wonder and almost a childlike wonder. So things that we encounter in our dreams carry feelings. We're going to have an example of perhaps of someone cooking at a stove, and there are flashes of blue sparks coming from the stove, and suddenly, which the person ignores, saying, "I'm cooking, I can't stop." And then the stove speaks back to that and literally pushes back by blowing up and throwing her to the floor. And it sounds like a horrible dream, but in a way, it's the image is interacting with her and her thoughts and preconceived ideas. In the fifth module, we'll move to imagos, which are personified images, and we'll talk about the sacred encounter, what happens when we encounter the little girl, the little boy, both of whom carry aspects of soul for us. They mirror aspects of our own soul. And we'll also talk about what we mentioned briefly, the imagos of conditioning, which embody our old conditioning that still lives in us, but now is beginning to separate and become more apparent to us. We no longer have to identify with our reflexive attitudes and reactions. Sixth module, we're going to continually talking about the movement from dream ego to dream soul as the point of view in the dream softens and becomes more receptive through various experiences with the boy, with the girl, and through adverse experiences with the imagos of conditioning. This leads to the last module where we'll touch on what I call the arc of sacred encounters. What happens not only when you have sacred encounters, for instance, with an archetypal teacher in one dream, what happens if there's a whole series of dreams that develop so that you really enter into relationship and with a figure who might appear as a teacher, as a friend, a mentor, a parent, and gives you a real strong feeling of connection and relationship. So that's where we'll end the course.
Well, it sounds like just an absolutely profound journey to take together. And I really just, you emanate so much wisdom, and there's such a poetic, powerful sensibility that informs you how you approach dreams that I really feel like all of us can learn from deeply. So I want to share just a few other things about the program for those who are considering joining, which we are warmly invited to do. In this journey, you get not only the 90-minute sessions with Rodger that are live, so you can ask your questions, you can engage your deepest inquiries, even ask sometimes about your own dreams and how you might engage them in a deeper way. You get video and audio of all of those sessions, as well as full word-for-word transcripts that you can refer back to and read again further down the road. It's really helpful to have these. You also have weekly exercises and practices to support your inquiry and learning process, and also a Facebook community group. In addition, we also have a number of great extra bonuses that are add to the value of the core program. So first off, there's a one-on-one session raffle, which is everyone in the course gets a chance to have a session with a member of the Natural Dreamwork team. That's one session that's a raffle. There's also a video dialogue with PDF companion from Rodger with Kezia Vida on how to write down your dream the natural dreamwork way. There's also a video teaching from Rodger on dream poetry. Yeah, Rodger, you want to say anything about dream poetry?
Sure. I have been searching for the connection between dreaming and poetry for a long time. I always intuited it. And I found a way, which I want to introduce to people through the video, a different approach. Instead of writing about dreams, we'll learn how to write from the dream state itself. And this can really unlock the practice. And I want to say that while, of course, this would be of interest to people who consider themselves poets, it's really open. It's really a way to unlock our creative powers and potency for anyone in who wants to write more creatively or just wants to write to learn more about themselves.
Beautiful. That's a great extra bonus. And I also draw attention, you can find more detail on this at naturaldreamworkcourse.com, naturaldreamworkcourse.com. It's also a bonus. It's about submitting a dream, which allows you to get dream feedback from a member of the Natural Dreamwork team. So those are all bonuses for everybody. And there's a special bonus that's available only until midnight. This is our way to encourage you to go to the page at naturaldreamworkcourse.com, tune in, and make a decision now while you have the most information. You've been hearing from Rodger. You really have a sense for what the value of this approach can bring to you. And if you do, you're going to get an extra bonus when you do sign up by midnight. So this is the DreamWorks Summit Collection. It's a full package of recordings and transcripts. It includes interviews with experts such as Robert Moss, Sandra Ingerman, Tokuba Turner, Jean Shinoda Bolen, a very rich array of teachers and practitioners of DreamWork. So you get that as a bonus when you sign up by midnight tonight, which is a great value by itself. So again, that's a fantastic extra bonus when you sign up by midnight tonight, the DreamWorks Summit Collection. So we know this is going to be a great program, a lot of depth. The DreamWork programs often have very rich communities that build around them, and a lot of value in terms of like your ongoing journey. So this is, you learn a whole way of approaching your dreams. It's going to last you a lifetime. So you can get all the details at naturaldreamworkcourse.com, naturaldreamworkcourse.com. We've kept the price very accessible. It's just 3 payments of $109, or you can save about 10% when you pay in full with $297. So the course is going to start on December 12th and run on Thursdays at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 Eastern. And I'd like to say that even if you can't make the live time, you can still get the full value by participating with the recordings and in the live community. So there's a money-back guarantee of your success, of your satisfaction, and probably your success as well in terms of applying this in your life. So the course begins on December 12th, and it's really going to be a wonderful journey to take together. So Rodger, we are near the end of our hour. There's some final minute or so. Anything that you haven't shared, you want to speak directly with folks who are considering taking the next step on the natural dreamwork journey with you?
I just want to welcome you. I believe that this course can help put you in touch with a deeper way of living from feeling and a deeper sense of the power of your own imagination, which is quite natural and belongs to all of us. And I really look forward to meeting you and engaging with you and hearing your questions and responses and seeing your creative work that you'll be producing in the course as well.
Great. Well, thank you, Rodger, so much for offering this this program from the depth of your heart and practice and exploration. And I know people are in for a treat. Again, you can go and get all the details and read the testimonials and all the modules at naturaldreamworkcourse.com. And if you sign up today, you get the full DreamWork Summit recordings as a bonus. So thank you all for this hour together. Thank you, Rodger, for the depth of wisdom you bring. And thank you for the upcoming program, which I know so many people are going to benefit from. So many blessings. And again, you can sign up at naturaldreamworkcourse.com. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.